And that's the thing. When you know better, you must do better. Because when you excuse yourself from stepping up to the plate and doing better, be that in parenting, be that in the way you interact with people, be it in relationships, partners, just general members of the public, then you step away from your true self. And so every time you step up and do the best you can do and put forward the best you that you are effectively operating from the quantum field.
Yes.
And you're going to be given the support from there, because deep down the back of your mind or down your spine, you're going to feel those little tingles. It just goes, yeah, that was the right thing to do.
Yes.
And that's part of those.
It feels honouring, doesn't it?
It does. And I wonder if, I believe that's part of the personal set of instructions we have.
Yes.
Be human.
Yes.
Be human to the humans around you.
Yes. Engage and come from your heart.
Come from a space of pure love if you can. Rock and roll, baby.
Welcome, Quanta folks, to another podcast vlogcast episode of Fark The Shoulds. I am delighted to be here. I'm Jodi from QuantiMama.
And I'm rapt to be here as well. I'm McGill from QuantiPapa.
He's wrapped like a present. McGill, bless his cotton socks, is trying to work out a way forward from this conversation. So I will literally explain to him, as I explain to you, our beautiful Quanta folks, what this episode is all about. This episode is called A Beginner's Guide to Being a Quantum Dad.
Okay.
It's so fun springing on him. So McGill literally just said to me, what does being a quantum dad mean? What does quantum mean? So quantum, for those of you that perhaps don't have a clear understanding, it's essentially the field, the universal field of everything. It's the understanding that everything is energy, right down to, the tiny little components of our cells. When you break it right down, you get to energy. It's the fact that in between McGill and I is not nothing, it's energy. It's the fact that you can't see energy. It's the infinite field of possibilities, which when we talk about, particularly with our kids, about manifesting or any of those sort of those modalities or protocols or practices where you're working with the universal field is how I describe it. I think other people will frame it in some kind of religious aspect. So it's, their God force. It might be their source connection. The point is, it's not something that we're sort of bringing to you as a possibility. It's been peer-reviewed and proven over and over and over again that the quantum field, the quantum physics, the quantum mechanics exists irrefutably. So we accept that as the case. Now, in terms of then being a quantum parent in this world, I think what happened was that we got an idea about this stuff. We started finding out about, energy and how you can change your perception and your experience based on how you shift your energy. We started getting an understanding around emotion being energy in motion. We have a greater vocabulary around not having trapped emotions, and I think that I feel very comfortable in the idea that ailments or expressions of dis-ease are actually all energy. It manifests physically, like you might get a sniffly nose, but there's something that's happened prior to that is actually talking about your experience energetically. And, have you released that emotion? Have you moved through it energetically? And so I think this is something that often will be the domain, and apologies to the aware men out there, but this is a domain of a lot of women occupy. Mothers tend to occupy as they get an understanding around, I guess, the quantum field. They tend to bring that into their parenting, and particularly being a reformed bogan Australian, which you confessed
Yeah, I confess,
in our
yeah.
last podcast together. So I'm not hanging you here. That was by your own hand. But when you actually are a reformed bogan who's considered a bit uncouth and perhaps unsophisticated, as that's sort of what we would say. I mean, we love bogans. That's part of the Australian landscape.
You kind of have to, because you
I
married one to start with.
I do. I definitely love bogans. I'm a big fan. But it's not the norm to have men talk in this way. And so what I want to do is dispel the idea that, firstly, if you want to be a quantum parent, that somehow you need to hang up your masculinity at the door.
Yep.
I want to talk about real examples of how you particularly, I mean, we can talk about quantum parenting, but how you particularly show up as a quantum dad.
So what I'd say, and listening to that beautiful explanation that Jodi's dropped on me.
You're welcome.
Maybe it's the language we don't have around it.
Yes.
Maybe as dads or as men, in a lot of cases, we struggle with that. Now, we've done a couple of podcasts. So the first thing that came to mind when you were talking about it was I was thinking about the power of words.
Yes.
And how you can say something and it can have a ripple effect. But then I would take that a step further and I would say, well, sometimes it's not necessarily, you can say something that's positive, but you're thinking something that's negative or something that's derisive, and the energy that is put out from there is not a positive energy. So it sort of brings me back to starting to move into the field of discipline with your thoughts, discipline with your action, and discipline with your words.
And authenticity when you show up in that space. Like, if you're going to say something empathetic to your child, then you must show up in that heart space that really fires up that empathy. Because if you're sitting there going, well, you're a stupid little bugger that shouldn't have done that, but a stupid little bugger that shouldn't have done that and serves you right, and you're also saying to them, oh, there, I'm here for a hug. The inauthenticity has a vibration that is out of alignment, and kids, I think, are incredibly astute at picking this up. Like, their bullshit detector is so good.
Well, they're far more in tune with feeling those ripples, or feeling the underlying current of what's being said.
Yes.
And especially, I guess, pre the age of 7 and 8, when they're right in that raw state and they're, able to almost glide between worlds of, feeling energy and being able to interact with it, before we move into that age of consciousness where we become far more aware of people around us.
And the ego becomes stronger, doesn't it? The awareness of image and so forth.
Yeah, I was going to say, and your identity starts to grow, and suddenly you get to a point where you're listened to and you feel that that's who you need to be to start interacting within this world. It's funny because I have an exact example from this morning.
Look at that. See, it's like it's scripted, but not.
No, totally not. So I had a ripping surf this morning. I've been out of the water for a while.
This is Happy McGill.
This is Happy McGill. This is yes. Jodi can dump something on me, and I'll just roll with it. This is the happiest
McGill will be, actually.
Yeah, caught a few good waves, and he's in a good space.
He is.
But I got out and got changed, and I jumped in the car and I checked my phone just before I was about to leave, and I had a missed call from the kids' phone. So we have a kids' phone in our house. Our children don't have an individual phone; they share it.
Yeah, it's like a home phone.
Yeah, and it's their point of contact when they need us. Anyhow, I rang it back, and our youngest, funnily enough, talking about the age of consciousness, who has just turned 8, rang, and he was freaking out because he had used super glue and it was stuck to his fingers.
And isn't that a rite of passage?
That's a whole other podcast. But yes, it's a total. I mean, we've all used super glue and ended up with our fingers stuck. Now, my first image was this hilarious thing that, maybe his thumb and pointy finger, or thumb and middle finger, might be stuck together, or a couple of fingers might be stuck together. That wasn't the case. But when he first said that, my first response, and this is part of where I've evolved, changed, become a bit more thoughtful in what I say. And I said to him, "Are you okay?" He said, yes, I just want you to come home right now. And it was really important to him. And I said, well, I'm 20 minutes away. I'm pulling out of the car park. I'll be there as soon as I can. Can I do anything for you? And he basically spoke a little bit, and then I said, okay, so can you tell me what happened? And it wasn't until probably maybe 30 seconds into that conversation, it went through my head was, why is this kid using super glue unsupervised at home?
Yeah.
And that still flashed into my mind, which I know probably 2 or 3 years ago would have been my immediate reaction of on the phone going, why were you using super glue?
Yeah, your first thing wouldn't have been his welfare.
It wouldn't have been A, his welfare, B, getting a bit of information as to why. And when I thought about it, I knew why. He needed to fix some stuff and no one was home. And then I thought, you know what? If I was at home and I wanted to fix something, I'd just have a crack and I'd do it. And so I was really surprised when I had that beautiful 20-minute drive home, and I didn't have the radio on, and drove home, a little bit of worry about him, just, hopefully he's not stuck to anything or, stuck his fingers to his face or something like that. And got home and came inside and just said to him, and he met me at the door, I should say, because I didn't make it inside. He met me with I've been waiting for you. And had all his fingers all sticking out and basically just said, I've got super glue on my fingers and I want to get it off. And it was freaking him out. And then we went from there.
So I want to take you back to the initial thing that you said in response to QK4 calling you in his distress, we'll say. What prompted you to say, are you okay?
It was just in his voice. He wasn't as calm as what he normally is. This is a kid that when he gets on the phone normally says about 3 or 4 words and gets his response that he does or doesn't want to hear, and then happily walks away and doesn't hang up the phone.
Yeah.
But this time he wanted that interaction. And as soon as and I would say I felt that more than I heard it from him, because he was, I guess from an external point of view, he wanted my attention.
How did you feel it?
Oh, you pick up on the tone in his voice. Did
it register in your body?
Yeah, I'd say it would, because it got my protector mode going. That all of a sudden there was, this is more than just your phone call complaining about your brother or your sister that are doing something.
Which is the usual.
Which is what we normally get on the phone from the kids. And it was just that whole thing going, there's more to this. He needs me. And he's not a kid that would generally come out and say, I need you. He will generally come out pretty fiery because he's pretty independent and he's doing his own thing, and he just wants to be let to do it, or wants the stuff so that he can do it and somebody else has got it. Whereas in this case, there was a genuine need in the way that of what was going on. So I'd say I felt instinct kicked in that I needed to be home.
And so the instinct, I mean, it's interesting because how you language it is different to how I language it. And I think that's what you're saying, is that, men can language it quite differently. But I think about sort of the impetus that McGill has to meet his needs, and how it registers in the body, and what we do talk about. But I think what you're not necessarily teasing out of that in such a kind of forensic way is that we used to just kind of go, look, you'd be right, I'll be home soon, and we get off the phone. But what you do now, and I see this patients happen all the time, is that you sit with them on the phone knowing that in fact, even though you're not there, you're remote and you're on your way, you can be present for him. And being present for him allows him to move through the wave of emotion to do with what's happened for him, which could be anything. I mean, he comes out of the gates defensive because his personal motto, I believe, is you know, the best defense is a good offense, you know. So he's out of the gates like
I
a bull.
wonder where he would get that from.
Yeah, I know. Look in the mirror often. Hey, it takes one to know one, right? So, but I think that what happens, and this is why I feel really comfortable languaging this, is that in those moments, what we're doing is actually meeting his needs so that those emotions can move through and they don't become trapped. And I think that as we understand that more and more with, you know, some of the things we learn about, like I think about the principles in, say, Rayard with Denny Johnson's work. It's extraordinary, and it talks a lot about how being able to move through the emotions, move through the triggers, and allow you know, those experiences to wash through us, but you actually see your way through it. You don't short circuit it.
Well, and you mentioned Denny, but you invite it in.
Yeah.
And you basically ask yourself why.
Yes.
Why is this
yes.
triggering me?
And you don't deny it. Because society's all about denying. And I think that what I see with you is being that quantum dad is that you show up and you sit in that space of, you know, is helping your kids move through the whole thing but not solving it for them.
Yeah, well, let's just come back to the topic for a sec. So I wouldn't necessarily describe myself to other people as a quantum dad.
You don't say, hi, I'm McGill, I'm a quantum dad.
Hi. No, I wouldn't. But if people were asking me about parenting and talking to me about children and interaction, not just kids, but with people,
yes.
I would always be the first one to say, well, I always try to come from a passive, not judgmental, engaged, listening point of view. And I guess this is where, and this is where I don't necessarily have the language around it that you do. And I just wonder how many people out there don't have a language or a framework to say, oh, I'm a quantum dad or I'm a quantum person. But you're doing so many things that are in alignment with being in that quantum sort of field where you're surrendering to things and you're feeling the ebb and flow and the energy out of it. I just wonder if that resonates for people out there. I mean, as soon as we start throwing these big things around, because I was initially a bit nervous on what are we talking about, because I don't see myself as that. Having a bit of an idea of what the quantum field is, I don't see myself as operating from that. But when you break it down the way you did, I would come at it from a different point of view and go, well, I do these sorts of things and I aim to do that and I try and do this one. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I guess they're all things that would, when put together, can be described as someone from the quantum, working within the quantum field, or it could be described as a sensitive, in tune, attentive person.
But it's also, I think, that recognition that we don't know better than our children. Like that's something that has become standard in our language, hasn't it? That our kids chose us, so luckily they're to blame, not us. And they come in, like I think we feel very comfortable with the idea that the kids have their own set of personal instructions that are playing out. They still need shepherding, they still need guidance, they still need a caretaker in there, but we very much revert back to them when in the first instance so they can actually work out what their right course of action is or how they can feel about it. And that's all parenting from the quantum field as far as my understanding goes. It's not this thing where we bring in, say, the slightly lower vibe parenting habits that we've experienced as children.
Well, yeah, it's interesting to say that, because the other thing that we preface in our language a lot is that our children are our teachers.
Yes.
Our children are our mirrors. And we've spoken about triggers before, and if something triggers you in what your child is doing or where your child is, 99.999% of the time that's a reflection of you. And that's a trigger that you need to deal with, not necessarily the child in front of you. And so your reaction that comes to that trigger, that's the point in time where you can invite in that trigger.
Yes.
Find out what it means to you and offer the support to that beautiful little mirror that maybe you didn't get when you needed that little bit of support. And it's a chance to go one step further, or 2 steps or 3 steps further than your parents or your guides may have been able to.
Yes. So what I think is incredible is that parents who are the primary breadwinner, and you know that's been you for most of our parenting journey. How do you see as the ways that you have shape-shifted into this kind of parent? Because you very much weren't that kind of parent when we had our first kid, in the nicest way possible, my darling. But, you know, we had an argument about the colour pink and it being on a jumpsuit for a boy. So that was a whole, you know, interesting conversation. But there was that kind of, there wasn't the same. It could be I've broken you. That's quite possible. I might have just broken you down.
You might have.
But what I see is that
I'm a battered wreck.
You are a battered wreck, poor thing. Send him flowers and sympathy cards. But what I see is that you in those moments now, and it's like almost doesn't happen. But there was a period of time where you clearly had the penny drop, and you went, oh, that's old, like that's my childhood coming through and I'm being heavy-handed and I'm going to change how I parent. I saw you start catching yourself, and I think for the most part you don't do it anymore. You don't do those old habits that tend to just be from our parents' generation, where it was, you know, children should be seen and not heard. Do as I say, not as I do. Blessings to my mother. That was one of her favourites. You know, so all of those ones that don't feel like you're in community with your parents, you're actually just sort of a nuisance that have come to live with them for 18 odd years.
That's interesting. I wouldn't say there's any one thing that stands out. I think it's a series of experiences and that sort of stuff. But one I'll give you that probably, you know, resonates with so many people is there have been times where I've got halfway through a sentence or halfway through a reaction and gone and just immediately stop, because all of a sudden it dawns on me that I sound exactly like my parents. Yeah. Now, in some cases that's a good thing, but normally when these triggers are happening, it's a negative thing. And, you know, I absolutely to bits admire my parents, but my mum would always say to me, we're doing the best we can, it's your job to learn and do better. And it was and that's the thing, when you know better you must do better, because when you excuse yourself from stepping up to the plate and doing better, be that in parenting, be that in the way you interact with people, be it in relationships, partners, just general members of the public, then you step away from your true self. And so every time you step up and do the best you can do and put forward the best you that you are effectively operating from the quantum field. Yes. And you're going to be given the support from there, because deep down the back of your mind or down your spine, you're going to feel those little tingles. It just goes, yeah, that was the right thing to do. Yes. And that's part of those. It feels honouring, doesn't it? It does. And I wonder if, I believe that's part of the personal set of instructions we have. Yes. Be human. Yes. Be human to the humans around you. Yes. Engage and come from your heart. Come from a space of pure love if you can. Well, there's no reason not to. I mean, I keep reflecting on how does one engage with the idea of pure love. And I just think, you know, babies that are born, they just have this aura of pure love about them. So I think that if you ever feel like you're not quite sure how to engage with it, go find a baby, whatever. You know, it might be a baby animal, it might be a baby human. Is this why we had to have 4? It could be. Because you wanted that feeling again and again and again. I am a bit of a junkie like that. Yeah. But I really do think that being a quantum dad can sound like quite an onerous thing. Like you've somehow got to be across all sorts of factors, but it's actually, it comes down to quite simple
quite simple kind of skills and things that you probably are doing almost intuitively anyway, and that is approaching from a heart space. And that includes giving yourself a break if you need to as well, because that's very heart-led to have a break. If you're feeling too stressed and adrenalized in a situation, you've got to take yourself out of there. There's been lots of times where I've kept pushing through and been stressed and just done more crappy parenting as a consequence.
And we've spoken about that before.
Yeah.
If you're not putting yourself first and you're not at 100%, if you put your partner before you, so suddenly they're at 100%, you're operating from 90. So how can you ever give 100% of yourself?
Yes.
How can you bring your absolute top-notch A game if you're not at 100% yourself?
Yes.
And that's.
But you don't always feel like you're at 100%. Sometimes you feel a bit shit.
But if all you can get to is 90, that's your A game at that point in time.
Sometimes it's about 48. Just saying.
But if you don't bring all of that 48.
I agree. That's right. If you hold it back.
Yeah, or if you put someone else first and drop yourself down to 38 and then someone else and drop yourself down to 28, and then remember you've got to cook dinner and do something else. Now you're down to 20. So when this moment hits where you need to bring the best part of yourself to an issue that your child or a friend or a family member has, you have got nothing.
Yes, that's right.
You don't have capacity at that point in time, or you don't have clarity to be able to give straight from your heart, because your heart is so depleted. We're down at 20%.
Yes. Or you've been living out of the mind that's just, really occupied with probably things that you wouldn't even think of on your deathbed. I mean, you guys know I'm a big fan of doing the deathbed goggles because I think it just brings you back into a place of appreciation about what's important in that now moment, and it gives you a spaciousness to say, actually, we're not going to worry about that. And one of the things that I think was very quantum of you was to bring do-overs into our vocabulary. That wasn't something that I did particularly well. Like, I hung on to stuff, but the do-overs were really powerful because in my mind, I was thinking, now we're kind of, being wishy-washy with the kids. And I always liked being really clear with the kids. And if I said something, like I hung on to that. But the do-overs was actually a very compassionate, empathetic thing to do. And that was really beautiful because it meant there was an opportunity for everyone to move through, those yucky feelings and emotions so I didn't get trapped.
Yeah, and the do-over, which is the classic way of describing it, doesn't just apply to the children.
Yeah.
You can always, it applies to you as well. And I think one of the powerful changes I had was when I would lose my shit, for want of a better description, or I'd be incapable at that point in time to do anything beyond grumble and be back in that really negative space. Yeah. And I'm a Monty for it, or I was. I've gotten a hell of a lot better, where I would grumble and then I'd walk away and then I would feel crap because that's not what I wanted to express. That's not how I wanted to interact. It wasn't a true representation of who I am. And I think it was probably QK3 that triggered me the most, and he's probably the one that brought this forward, where I would have that, because he is my mirror, and I would have that reaction with him, and I'd walk away and I'd be like, that's exactly what I heard, or that's how I felt when I was in that situation. And I'd have to leave it for a bit because, I can be a bit hot under the collar sometimes, especially when I was a kid. I didn't have a massive temper, but I knew how to hold a grudge. And funnily enough, so does QK3.
Yes.
But when I started reaching out to him, and the language I used was, mate, can I have a do-over? Because that was really unfair of me, and I would just like to talk to you when you're ready.
Yeah.
And
even that respect of, I'm ready to talk to you, but in fact they weren't always ready to talk. So I think that was even very respectful, just acknowledging where they were at, which might be they're not in a place to hear you, and you would wait for that. You
would. And what was interesting was often it would, as soon as the apology was out, it's like an acknowledgement that I've done something wrong, and I'd like to have an opportunity to correct that.
Yeah.
it seemed to break down a lot of barriers very quickly. And look, it may not work for everyone, but it really worked for me. And that breaking down those barriers and then coming in and saying, well, look, this is, if I could do that again, first of all, you know, this is what I would like to say to you. This is how I want to support you.
Yeah.
And it allows a rewriting of that experience for me, but also for my child or the person I'm interacting with, so that as they go forward, they don't need to carry the wounds that I'm carrying.
Yeah.
And I don't need to carry them either.
Yeah.
And each time you let one of those little crystals go that have been hanging around in your field because you've been hanging on to stuff or stuff just happens that you just never ever move, then you just free up another little 0.5% of yourself.
Yeah. And everyone benefits.
Especially yourself.
Because these moments are over in a blink of an eye, and we give them a lot of weight. But that said, they still need our attention because, you know, I think the trauma that lots of kids experience at the hands of well-meaning but essentially program parents who, you know, just understand instinctually that the way you parent is how you were parented, which is to coerce, force, bribe, and all these low vibrational ways to get kids to do what they want. You know, very rarely do we sit in a space of what is this like for this child? Do they have learned or trapped sort of feelings or traumas about what we've done in the past when we've forced them, you know, to do what we want on our timeline?
And also, when you're starting to examine these things, you need to look at it and go, I am responsible for this.
Yeah.
I am responsible for pushing this forward. If you're a parent and you've got young kids, put them out of your mind for a moment and think about their kids. What do you want your grandkids to be?
Yeah.
We have all these beautiful aspirational things for our own children and that sort of stuff, but there's another generation that may very well follow this.
Yes.
What do you want? What sort of upbringing do you want for your grandchildren? What sort of parent do you want your grandchildren to have? Because right now you are programming that parent. You are making that parent. And the more you can be from that pure love space and acceptance and guidance and interact and treat them as at equal and work through your own shit and move that on, then the less rubbish they're going to take forward. They'll find plenty of their own.
Yeah.
But the difference is the strategies that you demonstrated will allow them to move past these things much more quickly. And that beautiful grandchild that's waiting down the path is just, they're going to be this amazing being. You're going to love that child no matter what.
Yes.
But everyone else is going to love that child because they're just sitting in such a pure space. And they're going to look at the parent of that child and go, oh man, you're an awesome dad.
Yeah. And
that child's going to look at them and go, yeah, you know what, I'm doing all right, but thank goodness my parents did the right thing by me. They self-examined, they took self-responsibility and they made changes.
Well, and they saw me as an individual with my own set of instructions, my own wisdom. And I think that that's part of being a quantum parent. When you can recognise that your children have their own innate wisdom, it's powerful, because then you shut up and you hop out of their way and you let them experience. And sometimes they mess up. Sometimes they have experiences that allow them to, work out what's right for them and what's not. But they need to have those experiences. Very few people will learn based on someone saying, that's not going to work, just so you know.
Yeah.
I mean, the first thing I would do is go and do it just to see if it did work or didn't work, usually because I'm trying to prove them wrong.
Well, the funny thing about that is, from my story from this morning about the super glue, I came home and then helped with the super gluing and then walked out and happily, held my fingers together and said, this is what I thought I was going to come home to, and I'd actually glued my fingers together. I hadn't let it set, and showed the little fella, and he just went, oh, I wouldn't do that, Dad, while I was trying to then peel my fingers apart.
Oh, he is wiser.
By far. But at least he's got to see the other side of it.
Yeah.
Dad's a dill.
No, Dad's beautiful. Dad saw him. I love this conversation.
I didn't know I had anything to say in this conversation, but
No.
clearly I did.
You want to wrap up?
I don't really know how. I'm sure I do. Thank you for joining us. I hope this resonates with you and allows you the opportunity to see just how far or how often you move within the quantum field, and maybe it'll give you some strategies to help you operate from that space, because it's for your own benefit as well as those around you.